space was not silent. Not to those who lived in it. Inside the bridge of the SS Callahan, the air hummed with the vibration of overworked life support fans, the groan of metal bulkheads, and the occasional electrical pop from a panel that had seen better decades. The ship had the smell of old oil and scorched wiring, like an aging mechanic's shop floating in the void. Captain Marcus Reed sat in the pilot's chair, leaning forward, forearms on his knees, eyes locked on the radar screen. The green blips pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat. Somewhere deep inside, his own heart was keeping pace with it. The Callahan was a relic of an older age, a freighter that had survived 3 refits, 2 wars, and more near misses than Marcus liked to count. Her hull plating was mismatched, her engines had been tuned so many times they screamed in protest just to stay online, and one of her grav generators still stuttered every third day. She was rusty, temperamental, stubborn, and Marcus loved her for it. The captain's chair groaned as he sat back, running a hand over his short-cropped dark hair. The old vinyl had split years ago, leaving foam padding sticking out like some battle wound. It fit him perfectly. The bridge door hissed open behind him, and Lieutenant Sarah Cole stepped in, brushing her blonde hair back into a messy bun. She wore her harness straps loose, as if already expecting turbulence. "You called me up here for a reason," she said, her voice calm but edged with curiosity. "What's got you staring at that screen like it just insulted your mother?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. He reached up, tapped the side of the radar console, and magnified the view. 5 silver dots glowed against the black expanse. They were far away now, barely more than ghosts, but moving with relentless precision. Sarah leaned over his shoulder. The moment she saw them, her jaw tightened. "Dominion," she said softly. Marcus nodded once. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Sarah sank into the co-pilot's chair and started pulling up readings, her fingers flying across the cracked touchscreen. "They're running standard patrol formation. 5 ships. All military. No cargo haulers, no scouts. They're not out here by chance. They're here for us," Marcus said flatly. The Dominion didn't send warships for casual inspections. When they appeared, it was with purpose, and their purpose was always domination. Sarah glanced at him. "Cap, we don't have the guns for this. We barely have shields." Marcus didn't argue. He could feel the Callahan's weakness as if it were a living thing. She was old, stubborn, and scarred. But she had spirit, and right now, spirit was all that stood between them and annihilation. He thumbed the comm switch. "Engineering, report." A burst of static, then a gruff voice came over the speaker. "This is Jenkins. Starboard engines still coughing, Cap. I can give you 70% thrust if you don't mind a little fire." Marcus allowed himself the faintest smirk. "Keep it under combustion temperature for now. We may need to run before this is over." "Run from what?" Jenkins asked. Marcus didn't reply. He cut the channel. Outside, the void was serene, stars glimmering like diamonds scattered across velvet. It was almost beautiful enough to make Marcus forget that death was bearing down on them at high velocity. Almost. The first Dominion transmission came like a knife through the stillness. "Unregistered human vessel," the voice intoned, flat and cold. "You are trespassing in Dominion-controlled space. Power down engines and prepare for immediate boarding. Resistance will be met with termination." The comm went silent. Sarah stared at the console. That was fast. They usually give a second warning. Marcus leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. His green eyes narrowed. "They've already decided we're guilty," he said. Sarah hesitated, her hand hovering near the engine cutoff. "If we comply, maybe." "No." The single word was sharp, final. Sarah looked at him in disbelief. "Marcus, if we fight, we don't just lose. We get obliterated. 5 ships, Cap. We've got one rusty freighter with a coil gun that sounds like it's about to die of old age." Marcus turned his head slowly, meeting her gaze. His voice was quiet but hard as steel. "You know what happens to humans who surrender to the Dominion. No one comes back. Not traitors. Not refugees. Not even children. Sarah's throat tightened. She did know. Everyone did. The Dominion didn't conquer planets, they erased resistance. Entire colonies had gone dark overnight, their populations simply gone. The Callahan's bridge was quiet except for the hum of the failing systems. Sarah swallowed and nodded, the weight of the choice settling on her shoulders. "All right," she said softly. "Then we fight." Marcus's expression softened for a fraction of a second, a silent thank you, before he turned back to the console. "Bring the guns online." Sarah keyed the weapons systems. Somewhere deep in the hull, a pair of jury-rigged plasma turrets powered up with a pained whine. The Callahan wasn't built for war, but Marcus had spent years giving her teeth, piece by piece, scavenged from backwater markets and derelict battlefields. The radar beeped. The 5 dots were closer now, spreading into attack formation. The comm crackled again. "You have chosen defiance. Termination authorized." A chill went through the bridge. Sarah strapped herself into the co-pilot's chair and began rerouting power from non-essential systems. Lights flickered and dimmed as every spare watt was thrown into shields and weapons. "You sure about this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus tightened his grip on the flight stick. His jaw was set, his shoulders squared. "They want us to kneel," he said. "But the day I kneel is the day this ship stops breathing." He took a deep breath and exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of the moment settle around him. Then he keyed the engines and threw the Callahan into a hard roll, pointing her battered nose directly at the incoming Dominion fleet. "Then let's give them a fight they'll never forget." The stars seemed to hold their breath as the rusty human ship powered forward, toward 5 gleaming warships and almost certain death. The void lit up with fire. The first volley from the Dominion fleet struck before Marcus had fully braced. A blinding arc of plasma tore across the Callahan's forward shields, rippling them like water. The entire bridge shuddered, throwing sparks from an overhead conduit. "Shields at 60%. Sarah shouted over the alarms. "One more hit like that and we'll be flying naked." Marcus gritted his teeth and yanked the flight stick, throwing the freighter into a hard roll. The Callahan groaned like an old man with a bad back, but she obeyed, her engines flaring as she dove into the shadow of a nearby asteroid cluster. The Dominion ships adjusted instantly, breaking formation with surgical precision. They moved like predators, fast, clean, relentless. Marcus's jaw clenched. "They're hurting us." "Then don't let them," Sarah snapped, her fingers flying across the weapons panel. "Coil gun is charged. Turrets are green." "Then fire." The old coil gun barked with a deep, mechanical roar, the whole ship vibrating as the slug shot into the void. It streaked toward the lead Dominion ship and struck dead center. On the forward screen, the enemy ship's shields flared white, then failed. The impact blew a molten hole through its hull, sending it spinning out of formation. Sarah blinked in shock. "We actually hit them." Marcus bared his teeth in a grim smile. "We can do more than hit them." But the Dominion didn't flinch. The remaining 4 ships tightened their formation, adjusting instantly to cover the crippled vessel. A moment later, they fired again. Twin blasts of plasma slammed into the Callahan, one striking the shields, the other glancing off the port side of the hull. The ship screamed as metal buckled. Warning lights flared crimson across the console. "We've got a hull breach in cargo bay too," Sarah called out. "Seal it," Marcus barked, throwing the freighter into another spin. There was a hiss as the emergency bulkhead slammed shut, cutting off the breach. Somewhere below decks, Jenkins swore over the intercom, yelling about losing half the auxiliary power grid. "We'll make do," Marcus growled, more to himself than anyone else. Another volley sizzled past, scorching the empty void where the Callahan had been a half-second earlier. Marcus was flying not by instinct, but by sheer survival, twisting and juking through the asteroid field. The Dominion ships followed with unnerving precision. "Marcus, they're faster than us," Sarah said, her voice tight. "We can't keep this up. We're running out of room." "Then we stop running." Marcus cut the thrusters and let the Callahan drift, rotating just enough to face the nearest enemy ship. Lock the coil gun. Target engines. Sarah hesitated for half a second, then obeyed. The coil gun fired again, the slug spinning like a thrown spear. It hit the target's rear engine assembly, blowing it apart in a spray of shrapnel. The Dominion ship spun wildly, venting fire and debris. 2 down, Marcus muttered. But the victory was short-lived. The remaining 3 ships fanned out, circling like wolves. The next barrage tore through the Callahan's last shield. Alarms screamed. Shields gone. Sarah shouted. We're on armor now. Marcus's hands were slick with sweat. He pushed the engines to maximum, feeling the whole ship rattle as though she might shake apart. Hold together, girl, he whispered to the freighter. Just a little longer. The Dominion ships closed in. They were done playing. Marcus's mind raced. He needed an advantage anything. Then his eyes flicked to the navigation overlay. The asteroid field wasn't just cover, it was an opportunity. Sarah, reroute power from life support to the port maneuvering thrusters, he ordered. She blinked. Are you trying to kill us? Just do it. Sarah's fingers flew, and the Callahan lurched, swinging hard to starboard. The sudden move threw the freighter into the densest part of the asteroid field. The Dominion followed, but now they were forced to slow, adjusting to avoid collisions. Marcus grinned. Now we make this a knife fight. He skimmed dangerously close to a massive spinning rock, so close that the hull plating scraped against its surface with a teeth-grinding screech. Coil gun charged, Sarah said, her voice hoarse. Marcus waited, then fired at the base of a nearby asteroid. The slug shattered it, sending a cloud of debris directly into the Dominion's path. One ship tried to dodge but clipped a rock and spun out of control. Another wasn't so lucky, the asteroid fragments punched through its weakened shields, tearing its hull apart in a silent explosion. 3 down, Sarah breathed. Marcus didn't answer. He was already maneuvering again, sweat dripping down his temple, every muscle locked tight. The Callahan wasn't flying anymore, she was limping, bleeding power, one engine glowing dangerously hot. Marcus, Sarah said quietly, if they hit us one more time. They won't, Marcus cut her off. He was right. The last 2 Dominion ships slowed their approach, holding position at the edge of the asteroid cluster. They're waiting, Sarah murmured. No, Marcus said, his voice low. They're thinking. For the first time all fight, they're thinking about whether we're worth the risk. The Dominion didn't fear much. But Marcus could feel the shift. He'd bloodied their perfect formation. He'd made them hesitate. And hesitation was survival. Marcus keyed the calm, his voice steady despite the pounding in his chest. Come on, you bastards, he said into the void. We're still here. The calm stayed silent. The 2 Dominion ships hovered for several long, tense seconds and then began to withdraw, engines flaring as they fell back to regroup. Sarah sagged in her chair, letting out a shuddering breath. We're alive, she said, almost in disbelief. For now, Marcus replied. The Callahan floated in the silence of space, battered and scorched but unbroken. On the radar, the enemy ships held their distance, watching like predators that had lost interest for the moment. Marcus gripped the flight stick, staring out at the stars. He knew this wasn't over. The Dominion didn't retreat forever. But tonight, against every odd in the galaxy, a rusty old freighter had fought them and survived. The Callahan floated in the black like a wounded animal, hull scorched, one engine trailing a thin stream of vaporized coolant. Inside, the bridge smelled of burnt wiring and ozone. Marcus sat in the captain's chair, his hands loose on the flight stick, sweat drying on his brow. His heart was still hammering from the fight, but he knew it wasn't over. On the radar, the 2 remaining Dominion warships lingered just outside the asteroid cluster. They didn't advance, but they didn't retreat either. They were waiting, watching, recalculating. Sarah leaned back in the co-pilot's chair, her face pale in the dim light of the failing console. She stared at the screen as if willing the enemy ships to vanish. They're regrouping, she said, her voice hoarse. No, Marcus said quietly. They're deciding. Sarah turned to him. Deciding what? Whether they're willing to lose 2 more ships just to kill us. The words hung in the air like a death knell. Down in engineering, Jenkins's voice crackled over the comm cap. I don't know what you're doing up there, but we've got one engine hanging by a bolt and the other is running hot enough to fry eggs. If you push her any harder, you're gonna be flying a fireball. Marcus didn't answer immediately. He just stared at the radar, at the perfect silver specks that represented the Dominion's pride. Jenkins, he said finally, how much juice do we have left in the coilgun? A pause, then, enough for 1 shot. Maybe. You miss, you're throwing rocks next. Marcus nodded slowly. Then we make it count. Sarah's head whipped toward him. Marcus, you can't be serious. We barely survived the last fight. We should get the hell out while we can. If we run, they'll chase us, Marcus said, his voice calm but steady. We won't make it 3 jumps before they catch us. No, we end this here. Sarah stared at him. End this? We're a freighter, Marcus, not a battleship. He turned to her, his green eyes burning with something fierce. We don't have to win a war. We just have to make them believe we're too expensive to kill. For a moment, the bridge was silent except for the hiss of a leaking coolant pipe somewhere behind the consoles. Sarah swallowed, then nodded. All right. Let's make them bleed. Marcus's lips twitched into the faintest smile. That's the spirit. He pushed the flight stick forward, coaxing the battered Callahan out of the asteroid field and into open space. Warning klaxons wailed as the remaining engine strained, but Marcus kept his hands steady, every movement deliberate. The Dominion ships reacted immediately, shifting into a pincer formation. Here they come, Sarah whispered. Marcus flipped the comm to open channel. His voice rang through the void, low and defiant. Dominion fleet, this is Captain Marcus Reed of the SS Callahan. You came here to wipe us out. Look at your dead. Look at your burning ships. You think you can finish the job? Then do it. But I promise you, you won't leave unscarred. There was no reply, only the growing hum of their engines as they closed the distance. Marcus set the targeting computer manually, the system was so damaged that the autolock was gone. He lined up the coilgun crosshairs on the lead Dominion ship, waiting until he could see the faint glow of its forward guns. Marcus, Sarah said softly, if this doesn't work. It will, he said, though whether he was convincing her or himself, he couldn't tell. The Dominion opened fire. Brilliant lances of plasma streaked toward the Callahan. Marcus shoved the stick forward, flipping the freighter belly up, letting the first shot scrape across the underside of the hull. Metal buckled, alarms screamed, and Jenkins yelled curses over the comm. The second volley came fast, and this time Marcus didn't dodge. Instead, he fired. The coilgun unleashed its last slug with a thunderous crack that rattled the entire ship. The projectile crossed the void in a heartbeat and struck the Dominion ship's weapons array. The impact blew the entire forward section apart in a silent, beautiful blossom of fire. The ship didn't just slow, it stopped, drifting, its formation shattered. Marcus didn't waste a second. He gunned the engines, charging the remaining ship head-on. Marcus, what are you doing? Sarah shouted. Bluffing, Marcus said through gritted teeth. The Dominion ship had a clear shot. It could have ended them right there. But it didn't fire. Instead, it pulled back. Just a few hundred meters. Then a few thousand. And then it turned. On the radar, both ships, the crippled one and its escort, accelerated away, leaving the Callahan alone in the void. For a long, unbearable moment, Marcus didn't move. He just sat there, breathing hard, staring at the empty screen. They're gone, Sarah whispered, almost not believing it. Marcus let out a slow breath and leaned back in his chair, the tension bleeding out of his shoulders. Yeah, he said softly. They are. Down in engineering, Jenkins's voice crackled over the comm again. Cap, tell me we're done fighting. Marcus chuckled a tired, raw sound that was halfway between relief and disbelief. "We're done," he said. "For today." The Callahan drifted, battered and scarred, but alive. Sarah unstrapped from her chair and stood, moving to the forward viewport. The stars were quiet again, scattered like cold diamonds. For a moment, she just stood there, watching them. "They're going to remember this," she said. Marcus joined her at the window, crossing his arms. "Good," he said. "Let them." The Callahan might have been old, rusty, and held together by luck and stubbornness, but today she had stood against one of the galaxy's most advanced fleets and survived. Somewhere out in the stars, the Dominion would write their reports, run their simulations, and try to understand how a single human freighter had faced 5 warships and forced them to retreat. But they would never capture the truth. The truth was that the Callahan hadn't survived because of her weapons, her shields, or her engines. She had survived because Marcus Reed refused to die.